Okay, this week we're set up to do project cleanup. What specifically I'm looking for is just to fine tune the application. So we're really getting to the end of the semester. And at this point, with your final project, I really wouldn't do a ton of big changes. At least I wouldn't do it the week before. I try to get the app as close to finished as possible. The cleanup that I'm really looking for is like adding like icons, the name. So if you take a look here, the iPhone app says Hello World. There's no space in between it. If you look at Game Center, there's a space there. It's just a little bit more polished. It has an icon, and when you start, it's got a splash screen. When we start our app, it's just a white screen. And then it's appearing, So that was actually a little bit longer than I would have expected. But anyway, so that's what I'm looking for, is just to get maybe a splash screen, get a logo in there, put a space, or, if you have a really long name, it'll do an ellipsis like a dot, dot, dot. I wouldn't do that. I'd try to come up with a creative name that fits the screen. So on Android, you don't have to do the Android one if you're running into problems with your emulator. If you want to, that's fine. I'm going to go through and do both of them because they're very different on how they work. But just really your final project, I'd run it in the iPhone simulator. It's just going to be a lot easier for you. If you're not familiar with Android, you can click this button and see all of your apps. And again, the Android is demo.droid. And then if you open it up, again, the same fancy splash screen. Same app, it's just a little bit different. So I'm using Genymotion, so it's a little bit different than maybe what you're using, but Genymotion's a really good. It's an emulator that runs on your local machine. So anyways, what I want to do is I just kind of want to go through the process. Now, I need to create some images. Now, I'm not a graphic designer, and I'm really going to leave you guys to use whatever tools you're comfortable with. Some of you may use Photoshop, some of you may use Paint. I'm going to use GIMP. It's just a tool that I'm going to use. And I'm not a designer, so it's not going to be the best logo in the world. But my goal today is to just show you how to get icons put in, how to get splash screens put in. Seems like it should be so simple, and it's not as simple as I wish it was, but it's getting better. Okay, so anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to GIMP, and I'm going to start by just creating an icon. I'll start with the icon, and I'm going to start with an iOS icon. So I'm going to go File, New. Now, in the real world, I'd probably create, a really large icon. So when we're talking about icons, these are both platform specific. So iOS has icons and Android has icons. They both deal with icons differently. So Android deals with icons in the resources drawable, and the drawable's the default. So the default icon for Android is 72 by 72. So if I just open it up and go to adjust size, I can see 72 by 72. If I go to a high def, it's probably 72 by 72, adjust size. Yeah. Alright, so let's go to the really ultra high def. Okay, that one's a little bit bigger. 144 by 144. Okay, so what they do is they give you an opportunity to give multiple versions of your icon and any image that you're using. So if you're using any image, if you want to have a high quality one for a high res phone, it won't scale it will use the one out of this folder if it can find it. If it can't find it, then it'll use the one in the drawable folder. So anyways, you can kind of Google onto that a little bit. There's a lot of different sizes and ways that you can interact with it, but that's the way Android works. So what we're going to do for Android is we're going to create an icon 72 by 72. Now, the way iOS works, the iPhone, split into two different areas. You've got the info P list, and if I go into the info P list, in here you have your launch image and your app icons. So they're adding those into an asset collection called app icons. And that's something actually fairly new. They're really trying to clean this up. It was very cumbersome and it was a page that scrolled forever. And then you have your launching image. Now this is probably the most confusing thing I've worked with. I'm going to show you the stupid trick, but it is what it is. I spent many hours trying to get my launch icon to work and realized that I just needed to just delete that out, and it worked. But I'll talk about that once we get to the splash screen. Okay, so my app icons, those are held inside this asset collection. And if I go into the asset collection, lots and lots of icons. So lots of different sizes. Now, the way that my brain works is, boy, it sure would have been nice if Apple just let me give them a very large image, and then on the back end they would resize them all for me and then apply them where they're needed. They're not doing that. So this does really, kind of suck a little bit. What I'll do is I'll actually create a folder with my logos. It's a logo folder for the project that I'm working on, and I actually go through and I create all of the images at all of these screen sizes. Now, I'm not expecting you guys to do that. It is a universal app, so it could run on the iPad, so the iPad images would be valid. I don't expect that. I do a couple, Right now I'm using a simulator, and in the iPhone 6s simulator, I'm running iOS version 9.3. So in this case, my iOS simulator 9.3 would be this one right here. So I would probably just create the 120 by 120. But that's, I'm just going to try to keep the video short. Otherwise, we'll be here all day watching me resize images. So anyways, that's just a quick overview. I'm just going to go through, and this is my test project. All right, so I'm going to just go to Google, and I'm going to go to images, and I'm going to just Google test tube. And I'm going to go to images. Now, in the real world, I would look for something that would be, copyright cleared, okay for modification. If it was a commercial app, if it was something that I was doing for a client, I'd just buy an app. I'd just buy an image and just be done with it. Spend the $40, get something that has been created for you. There's also a place called Fiverr that you can get, icons and stuff made for like $5. Okay, so since this is just test, I'm just gonna... Okay, so one thing to notice, well, first of all, it's a stock image, but it doesn't matter. It's a JPG, a JPEG. I want to get a PNG. I want to get a transparent background. So what I'm going to do is, I'm sure there is a type. All right, I'm just going to throw in PNG. I know there is a way that I can filter by type, but okay, here's a PNG. It's a test tube. It's not the sexiest test tube, but it'll work. I'm just gonna save it. So I'm just gonna right click, do save image as. Okay. So I'm just going to kind of just make this short and sweet here. I'm going to go over into my GIMP and I'm going to create a new image. So I opened up GIMP. I don't know if you've used GIMP, that's fine. If you want to use Paint, that's probably easier. I'm going to go File, New, and what I'm going to do is I'm starting with my iOS logo. That's probably the easiest one. I really should say my iOS icon. I'm going to do 120 by 120. Alright, so I'm just going to give this thing a background color. So I'm just going to create a color for my icon. So it's a green test tube. I'm going to make it somewhat light, but have some color to it. And then I'm just going to grab my paint bucket, plop that on there. Okay, so I want to add that other image, which is huge. I'm going to add open as layer. So I want to open this as a second layer. So on my desktop, test tube. Yeah, that's really big. So I'm going to scale that guy. I'm just going to go, I'm just 100 by 100 width. No, let's do my height is 100. Whatever. Yeah, hindsight, I probably should have grabbed a smaller image. Scale that again. All right, so that's not bad. That's my logo. All right, so that's what I'm going to go with. All right, so I'm just going to export, and I'm just going to call it icon. Okay, so I put that in my documents. All right, so if I double click on that, I've got my 120 by 120 logo. I gotta quit saying logo, it's actually just an icon. Okay, so I'm gonna leave that for right now because I want to make a splash screen. So in my info plist, I'm on my iOS project, my info plist, and I've got my app icons. So that's pointing to my asset library. And just so that way that makes sense. If I down click that, I can see that this is an asset, and then the asset is app icons. And if I go to my asset, I open up the asset, and then I notice I've got app icons. So I think I determined that the one that I really want to deal with is my iPhone. So I'm just going to grab this. Now if it's not the right size, even if it's a pixel off, it won't let you do that. All right, so you won't set. So you can set it and you can unset it. So you click on it, you select it, hit open, it's set. All right, so at this point, I've got my icon. So the other thing that I thought was annoying was Hello World didn't have a space in it. Underneath my info plist, I can do Hello space World. And if I run this now, yay. So you see it? They rounded the corners. They did everything they wanted to do. Still don't have a splash screen. But at this point, I do have a space in between the words, Hello World, and I've got a nice little icon. All right, so that kind of makes it feel a little bit more official, you know. So let's do the splash screen. So my splash screen needs to look better than this. So there's two ways that we can do it. We can go back over into the asset and go to my launch image. And again, you have all these different sizes. Now, this is the way I used to do it. It would just pop up an image, and maybe it was the vendor logo or something like that. The downside with a launch image is you can't do any animation. So one of my last customers had a lot of data that was getting downloaded the first time it ran, and they would just see the logo, and it would sit there for 4 to 5 seconds, and they assumed that the app crashed. So then they would close it and reopen it, close it and reopen it. It would have been nice to have like a loading and a progress bar. You can't do that with an image. You can't even have like an animated image. So if you do like an animated GIF or something like that, it won't work. So you need to do something different. So we could do that. If you do use a launch image, currently I think there may be a bug in this version because I tried it beforehand and it didn't work. But what I had to do is, if I load a launch image, I can't use a launch screen. All right. Now, over here, I can select none. Over here, for my launch screen, there is no selection for none currently. So you have to delete it. And if nothing is for my launch screen, it will automatically use my launch image. Now, if you do want to get the status bar and the scroll bar and all of that, then you need to actually have a different page load, and then it would load your app. So that can give you the ability to run code and fetch data and do a little loading bar. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use a launch screen, and then my image source is going to be none. All right, so it's a toggle. It would be nice if it was like a radio button that we can select or something like that. But right now, this is the UI that we've got. So my launch screen actually is using Storyboard. Now, this is native Storyboard with iOS. So if I double click on the Storyboard, takes a little bit for it to load. And this is a little hokey too. Everything isn't scaled absolutely correct. You're going to have to play with it a little bit. Well, the storyboard will eventually load, and it'll be a white square box just like we see when the splash screen comes up. Well, that's loading. I'm going to work on my splash screen, just that way I've got a splash screen. So I've got my logo. I'm going to go new. And this time, my splash screen, I'm just going to make it 720 by 1280. So notice the size is different, you know, because it's different. It's now the size of the screen. Um, Now, that's the size of an HD screen. It's probably better to go big and then let it downscale versus you could go the traditional like iPhone 4 screen, which would be like 320 by 480, but then it scales up and then it gets a little bit more fuzzy. And so, all right, so I'm going to do the same thing. I've already got my background color, which is good. So I'm just going to use my paint bucket. And I have the image that I want to use. So I'm going to go open as layer and open up that test tube. Hey, that's actually not too bad. So, yay, I'm just going to keep it. All right. So then I'm just going to go export as. This time I'm going to make sure I put it on my desktop. And I'm going to call it splash. I'm just going to go with the defaults. And now on my desktop I have my splash. So that's good. Done with the test tube. Maybe not. All right. Okay, so there's the white screen. So I want to add an image on the screen. So in this little toolbox, I'm just going to search for image. I see my image view. I'm just going to drag that out here. And for my image view, I've got an image source. So I'm going to come over here to my property. And I am going to go to my desktop. And I'm going to go to my splash screen. I'm going to copy that into my project. Now it's in the project, so now I need to go back in there. I can select it. Alright, so then I'm just going to scale this down a little bit. So I'm just going to go there and see how this works. This is kind of a trial and error. I move to the top and move down. Now, in my image, I could have put words in there like this is, you know, the test app, you know, whatever. Okay, so I can see it's going to come over more and down more. But I can see the image went on. It's up to you if you want to bump past the carrier or not. I mean, this is completely up to you. I'm going to move it up a little bit. It looked like I could see a little bit of white in there. I'm just going to take it this way a little bit. Just going to rerun it. I don't know why that whole storyboard isn't scaled correctly. It should be. Okay, so I can pull it down a little bit more. Now, in the real world, this would be a cooler splash screen. You know, I mean, this is just, you know, for demos. So I'm just going to pull this down. So notice I'm now down beyond the storyboard. I'm going to zoom out so you can see them down there. So it's definitely not ideal. And you can try using the image as well. I tried it today, I didn't have success, and I noticed that there was a bug listed on Bugzilla. This looks perfect. At this point, that's a winner. I'm done. Okay, so iOS, actually, we now have the splash screen. We've got the space in the name. And we got the logo. So iOS is good. All right, so at that point, this is ready to go. Now, you have to figure out what you're all deploying to. You got to decide who your target audience is and what phones you're going to support. So if you're doing 5 and 6, you're going to have to do these. If you're doing 7 and 8, if you're doing a commercial app, I probably would do them all. I really would. That's just the way I would do it. I always figure it's better to be safe than sorry. Okay, so iOS, check. Android. I'm going to set this as my startup project. I'm going to launch Genymotion. Oh, and it was so fast. Alright, so it's going to kill the app. Then I'm going to launch it. Okay, so bad logo. Alright. Bad name. No splash screen. Exactly the same thing. Alright, so the way Android handles everything is through the activity. So I'm going to go to my main activity. And here my activity has a label, has an icon, has a launcher, it's got a theme, it's got rotation, orientation. That's something I guess I should point out too. If you want to handle orientation, that's done in this plist as well. So if you want to just say my main interface, no, where is that? Oh, here it is. Or I can say I only want it to be portrait only, so that way people can't rotate it and the screen won't switch. Otherwise you can, allow whatever. So, and it's the same here. You can configure, the orientation. For right now, I'm not worried about that. I don't think that's something you got to worry about. You can easily Google it. You know exactly where to add the orientation. Okay, so I'm going to give this a consistent name. So it's going to be consistent name of Hello World. And then the app icons. So what I'm going to do is, just to keep this easy, I'm going to go into my resources, my drawable. I'm going to get rid of the high res one. I'm just going to delete that out. In the real world, I would add all of these, or I'd overwrite all of these. But once we create it and add one, I think you can figure out how to resize it and add that icon into each one of these folders. Okay, so I've got an icon here. Now that's going to be the only icon used because there's no HD ones. I know that's 72 by 72. I also know that this icon is a drawable icon, so it's looking in the drawable folder for a file named icon. So we got that. We tested before 72 by 72. We also have an icon here. I'm just going to open this up and go to Tools, Adjust Size. I'm going to go 72. I'm going to save it. I'm going to close it. Alright, so I've got an icon. So actually I'm going to delete this one. And then I'm going to add File. And then on my desktop, I've got my icon. I'm going to open that up. I'm going to copy that into my project. I'm going to overwrite the existing one, even though I deleted it. Okay, so name should be good, icon should be good. Oh, Jenny Motion. It's going to start my phone up. So the splash screen is a little bit more complex, believe it or not. So we'll just see if we get the icon working and we get the name consistent with the iPhone version. Okay, so that's up and going. Jenny Motion's going. I'm just going to run this. Just going to pull this to the side so I can see it building. So the app's going to launch. We're not going to see the launch screen, which is expected. And we're going to have to actually close it so that way we can see the name and the icon. So far so good. Alright, so I'm going to go back. I'm going to come over here. Hey, hello world, and a little test tube. So they don't round the corners. Apple rounds the corners. Android has square. So it's just different systems. You know, you just gotta do what you gotta do. Okay, so I want to work on the splash screen. Now I've got a website that I use, and I'm gonna post this. I did close this simulator. I was wondering if I closed that last time. I was going to relook into the video. Alright, so I'm going to fire that up. So I use a website every time I'm going to do a splash screen. It was a blog entry, which I think is really helpful. It helped me get this going. So we need to have our splash screen image. Okay, this is the iOS version. That one's easy. Got our splash image. We need to deal with the style, and we need to create an activity. This was a little bit more difficult than I thought it was going to be. I mean, after you do it, and after you find a resource that tells you how to do it, it becomes a little bit easier. But the first time I had to do this, you know, I had to be honest, I think it took me a full day just to figure out how to get this stupid little screen to splash onto the phone. It drove me crazy. So I felt like this shouldn't be that hard, but it is. But I'll guide you through it. It won't be bad. We have our drawable folder. We already created our splash. I don't need to change the size on it. Android actually does a really good job with scaling things. So in the drawable folder, I'm just going to add a file. I'm going to add that splash image. Now it's important that you're calling it splash.png. That is important. So you want to rename it if you have a different name, because in this blog we're going to go through and use his style, which is pointing to the drawable splash. So it's just the way we got to do this. So the first thing we do is we add in the image. The next thing we need to do is add a style XML. All right, now you probably already have one. I know back in the day that didn't come, the values, so you may not have it. I do have a styles XML. If you don't, you just right click, say add new file, and then you grab an XML and you just call it styles, just like that, all lowercase .xml. But if you have it, we're just going to open it. So Xamarin gave me some default styles. If you had to create it, all you need to really do is copy all of this. Now, we already have a styles, so we don't need to define it. We don't have to come up with a resource. We're really only caring about the specific style. So I'm just going to grab this style. I'm going to copy it. because notice I've got my XML markup, I've got my resource, and then these are all individual styles here. So right below the last style, I'm just going to paste in this style. And basically what this is doing is we're giving it a name of theme, splash, it's our splash screen. And then what we're doing is we're setting the background to the image in the drawable folder called splash, which drawable splash. So that's what that's doing. And then the other thing we're doing is we're making the window not have the title bar and stuff. So it's just going to be like a splash screen. It's what we would expect. Okay, so we copied that over. That's pretty straightforward. I'm going to save that. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to create another activity. And this activity is going to be for our splash screen. So it's like a whole nother window that opens up. Kind of like in iOS we have the storyboard. In Android we're calling that an activity. So I have to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go up to my Android project. I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to add a new file. I'm going to Android specific. I'm going to activity. And I'm just going to call this thing splash activity. Splash activity. I'm going to go new. Okay, so it gives me all of this. It gives me a default activity as a splash activity. I'm actually going to delete everything out except for the namespace. So I'm going to leave my namespace in here, and that, and of course, I mean all of the using statements. But over here, I'm just going to grab his activity and his main activity. Oops, I missed a square brace. Got to make sure I get that. I'm just going to paste that in. Okay, so now what's happening is the activity is now setting up the theme splash, which we just did. That's in that style. And then what we're doing is making this the main launcher. So that's how Android knows, hey, start with this activity first. No history, no back button. All right, so you can't go back to your splash screen, which you wouldn't expect. Okay, so now that's our activity. Now on the create, we're setting this up. Now we're pausing, so 3000, so we're pausing for 3 seconds. That way they have an opportunity to see the splash screen. In the real world, I don't know if I'd really do that. If I'm fetching data, I would fetch it, and when it's done, then move forward. But then we're starting our activity, and that's the main activity that we came from. So for right now, we're just going to keep this as is, and we're not done yet. We set this up as being our main launcher true, which means on the main activity, we can't have two that are main launcher true, otherwise it wouldn't know which one to pick. So I need to remove that main launcher true from the activity within the main activity. So at this point, if I start this, I actually think we're good. Oh boy. Jenny Motion, I don't see you. My Android emulator's on a different screen, so I'm hoping it doesn't have an error on the... I'm afraid if I slide over and look, it's going to quick pop up. Okay, so it's waiting for package to compile. Alright, so I'm going to bring this over. Okay, so it's installing it on the device. Moment of truth, we got our splash screen. It's not the best splash screen, but it's a splash screen. It's an image. You guys know how to manipulate images. You can make it look cool. So at this point, we've got our splash screen. We've got our, oh, hello world, name. And we've got our splash screen working. So I don't know why it's not giving me the right name. Hello World should have a space in there. And that is my label on my main activity. My splash screen does not have the name. I should not need to add this. I'm just going to give this a try. I need to put a comma in here. Got to remove that comma. Nope, I'm outside of. Okay. I'm actually surprised that did that. I mean, big picture, not a huge deal, but it really should have. It should have been with a space. File manager. Okay, now we got the hello world. So it's kind of weird, but I'm not going to think about it too much. I don't know how that happened. Okay, so anyways, hopefully you found the video helpful, and that's really what I'm looking for your kind of cleanup process for this week.